So welcome everyone. We're here today to learn about how to do a hazard assessment. Amy's going to provide some tools for us and some information. And she's also going to sort of give a little bit of a discussion about, what are your responsibilities as an employer and what are your responsibilities, or what things should you know as an employer and what things should you know as an employee coming back to work during this crisis. So many of you probably already know this, but Amy is a business leader, a safety enthusiast, a volunteer, and most importantly, a family girl. She spent almost 20 years as a safety coach, impacting and enhancing safety as a priority for thousands. So whether it's in the classroom as a keynote speaker or coaching, her passion is for everyone to live the most fulfilled, healthy, and safe life possible. So I know you can't all give her a round of applause, but please welcome Amy Zook.
Hello, everybody. It's great to be with you, great to be back. So Sandra did a great job introducing what it is that we're going to be going through in this lunchtime webinar. Certainly there'll be a lot of time for questions at the end, and anybody who can't catch the webinar time for questions, I will have my email at the end as well as phone number, so definitely get a hold of me. So believe it or not, I've done training for over 20 years, but haven't really done a whole lot of webinars. I've done enough Zoom meetings, so I'm going to get the screen share going, and Sandra's going to be filtering through, a few questions as we go through, send out some polls, but if we can keep most questions till the end, that'd be great. All right. So can everybody see my screen? Is it working?
Yes.
Yes, it is. Okay, perfect. So I just want to say a bit more about myself. So I'm a co-founder of F&S Safety Buzz. So soon we'll begin going back to being known as the Safety Buzz Campus. I love being able to work with people and to let people know how to get home safely every day, what you need to know when it comes to safety in the law. Safety is one of our #1 human needs. But what we also see is the fact that, we've got all these needs, but we also have legal obligations as well. So in addition to being a safety coach, I'm also a John Maxwell leadership trainer, coach, speaker. So bringing in motivation and how to lead people in safety is something that's really valuable as well. So since not everybody has their own safety rep, or their own worksite health and safety committee, perhaps not even their own safety program yet, I just want to get you guys knowing that there are resources out there. You can build your own safety programs. You can get lots of information. We can help you guys out. Now, I'm also not an occupational health and safety officer, so I'm going to give you information on what the law is saying, and really am going to leave it there. Now, one thing that John says, and I want us all to think of ourselves as leaders, because we're all influencers, whether we're employers or employees. We're influencing someone at work, at home, in our general lives. So a leader knows the way, shows the way, and goes the way. And one of the most important things is to be able to provide our teams with that feeling of comfort and security, especially getting back into our relaunch. So 4 things that John Maxwell says to prepare for crisis. And, we've been in this COVID situation for a while now. So it's been well over a month, getting closer to 2. So with this relaunch, 4 things that I want to bring forward are prepare for every possibility. And when we're looking at safety, hazard assessments work really good for this. Define our reality, communicate often. OH&S law, one of the biggest aspects is that everybody's involved, everybody understands what is required. and then learn to grow. I can't think of a better situation where we've been put in a situation where now we really do need to grow and change the way we're doing things. So just quick overview, we're going to look at human factors and behaviors when it comes to safety, Alberta Occupational Health and Safety. We'll focus on the Act, but definitely we'll probably see a few things out of the regulations and code. Legal duties of employers and employees, refusing unsafe work, violence and harassment, and then actually not only learning about a hazard assessment, but I'm going to go through the hazard assessment that the Safety Buzz campus built to bring people back, and then just give you tools to be able to do this yourself. So for human factors, first thing we want to think of is safety and security. That is a basic need of everybody. We all want to make sure that we're safe. We all want to be safe for our families, for other people. Now, when it comes to, and I'm going to say both employers and employees, but maybe a little more so employers, we've got that safety versus productivity. I'm sure, like us at the Safety Buzz campus, we're limiting to half capacity at best. So productivity is certainly not going to be where we would like it to be, and perhaps, again, many of you maybe have not been open in the last little while, so we were closed for over a month. So we've got that weighing on us. So when we're looking at our productivity, we're also looking at financial security. So how do we make as much money as possible, but we still have to be safe? And safety is not just something that we want to do, it is a legal obligation. And whether or not we believe it, every single workplace out there is bound by Alberta Occupational Health and Safety. So the laws they have are the same for a grocery store as they are for a construction site, as they are for a hospital. We've got risk tolerance. People look at risk in different ways. Using a tool such as a hazard assessment gives us a really nice baseline saying that, okay, everybody is going to follow these same basic steps or the same assessment. So those people who've got those high level risks or low level of risks, we're now going to just kind of meet in the middle. And finally, we've got those legal and moral responsibilities. When we're relaunching, there are things that are set out by order, again, meaning legal requirements. So we need to know if we are allowed X amount of people, that's how many we're going to have. If we need to keep our social distancing, that is what we're going to do. So, you know, sure, we might be able to say, hey, you know, I could probably squeak in a few more people, but we've got those moral responsibilities that are going to be keeping everybody safe. And all of this takes bold decisions. So some of the big thoughts, and you know, I've got some links in the document for businesses specifically when we're looking at COVID and relaunching. But the top things that we thought about as a team at the Safety Buzz campus is, how do we protect our team? What kind of process are we going to use for sanitization? How are we going to maintain social distancing? And how do we prevent crowding? So those were the top four. So if you can see by the picture that I've got in the slide, we have run a first aid class. So we looked at a lot of our risk and we decided, hey, you know what? How we can mitigate much of our risk is one person per table. We're going to spread everybody out. We're going to use mannequins for our practicals, and we're going to have reminders all over the place about our hand hygiene, as well as our social distances. And if you're sick, please make sure and don't attend class. So for some overall general requirements and responsibilities. So this, and you'll see in the next slide, there was a document put out by Alberta OHS. And when we look at our general duties of employers, supervisors, and workers, Employers, they need to ensure, as far as reasonably practicable, health and safety of workers and others at the work site. So others includes everybody you have, including the public. Supervisors, they need to protect, again, as far as practical, health and safety of those they supervise. So they really are filling much the same role as the employer, which I'll define a little further in the next couple slides. And workers have to take reasonable care and cooperate with the employer to ensure the health and safety of themselves and others at the work site. So just as much as employers have responsibilities, so do the workers. And you know, I've got this link to the next pictures that I'm going to show, and certainly this PowerPoint I will share with those of you that could utilize it. Oh. I guess we're going to see this sheet in a few seconds. I thought it was right away, but I'll just hold it up. This is the document that I'm talking about. Duty to provide information. Employers need to make sure that they're keeping people safe and they have enough information for those at the workplace. So information, the big thing it's going to include is hazards at the work site, hazard controls, work practices, and procedures. So a lot of the nuts and bolts of what we want to be discussing today. Every employer shall keep readily available health and safety information, copies of the law, and as well ensure that people know about the hazards identified and they are communicated. You know, building a hazard assessment is great, but if your team doesn't know what the hazard assessment's all about, it's really not going to benefit anybody. So what is Alberta OH&S? They've got a very simple purpose. So occupational health and safety, which is the OH&S side, has a purpose of preventing work-related injuries, illnesses, and fatalities by working with employers and workers. So an employer is someone who employs or engages people, or they're designated by an employer. So supervisors, we'll see, are going to, again, have very similar responsibilities. And keep in mind, employers are also employers of people who are volunteering. It's not just paid workers. So I know there's a lot of bullets here, but I'm going to kind of shortcut some of these. So employers have to ensure health and safety of workers and public, and that really sums it up. But the way that they're going to do this is by making sure workers are aware of responsibilities, protecting workers from harassment and violence, making sure that workers are supervised by somebody competent, workers are trained. If we're dealing with a large enough staff that we have joint worksite health and safety committees or safety reps, the employers have to work with them. The only way that we're going to have a good safety culture is by everybody working together. Resolving health and safety concerns and complying with legislation and cooperating with a person exercising a duty under OH&S, such as an officer. Supervisors, so they are going to be in charge of a worksite or have authority over one or more workers. And really, they're the designate of the employer. So they're going to do the same thing. They're protecting health and safety, supervising, advising their workers of all known or unforeseen work hazards, reporting safety concerns to the employer, and they do have to also work with someone that has a duty under OH&S. Then we have the workers. They are engaged by, or they're any person engaged in any occupation. Again, that could also be a volunteer who's performing services. That could be someone self-employed. So just because you have a contractor on site, if you're the employer, doesn't mean, okay, well, that contractor is responsible for their own safety. Well, you're still deemed their employer while they're at your site. So keep that in mind. So workers, we've got some big responsibilities, and why I say we is very commonly employers are still deemed as employees if they're doing work at that work site. So we need to protect our own health and safety and those in our vicinity. Cooperate with their employer or supervisor by following rules, using all hazard controls, and wearing personal protective equipment designated or provided by the employer. And this is really one of the key points. If you feel, okay, well, I don't really want to use this PPE because it's not comfortable and I don't feel like it, we need to realize it is a legal responsibility. Refraining from causing or participating in harassment and violence, reporting health and safety concerns to employers or supervisors, and complying with the law and cooperating with an officer. So workers have three main rights. They have the right to know, the right to participate, and the right to refuse unsafe work. And we will touch on that unsafe work shortly within the presentation. So suppliers, a lot of us are receiving products right now, and often they are received by courier. We're not just going and picking things up as much as we used to. So a supplier sells, rents, leases, erects, installs, or provides equipment. They can also sell or provide harmful substances or explosives. So, whether it be a dangerous good or not, suppliers have responsibilities. So they need to make sure the products they supply are safe to use. So equipment must be properly maintained, repaired, adjusted with all covers and guards in place. If it's a harmful substance, it's safe to use when used according to manufacturer specs. Proper maintenance of equipment if supplier has maintenance agreements in place. Compliance with appropriate standards. CSA is probably the biggest one we're looking at. And employers where the equipment was not supplied are aware if equipment or harmful substances or explosives don't comply with safety standards. Next, service providers. So certainly Safety Buzz Campus fits in here, Community Futures, Apex, a lot of us are providing services right now. And since the Act actually changed recently, this was something quite new that was added. So service provider provides training, consulting, testing, and program development or other services. So they must ensure that the services offered to a person meet OH&S legislated obligations. Service providers are responsible for making sure their services are completed by a competent worker. No person at or near the worksite is endangered by their activities. They complete a hazard assessment to ensure the steps they can take to eliminate or control hazards, and make sure workers use required personal protective equipment while they provide service. Temporary staffing agencies.
Amy, can I just butt in for a second on that?
Yeah, for sure.
So we, if we decide we're opening up our doors, then we are responsible as well for having a hazard assessment done as well. Yes.
Correct. Yeah.
And then if we have people coming in and we've decided that the people coming in to see us have to wear masks, then we have to provide those, right?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. So temporary staffing agencies are a person who retain workers or deploy or facilitate placement of workers with other employers. So they need to make sure workers who are assigned to another employer are suitable to perform the tasks required, providing workers with necessary protective equipment, making sure the employer is capable of ensuring the health and safety of the worker. So, ensuring that if you're sending somebody to a workplace, it is indeed a safe workplace. And workers with the employer to ensure they've assessed hazards. So going through that hazard assessment with these new temporary workers. So duty to provide information. So I said earlier that every workplace has to follow Alberta OH&S Act Regulation Code. Also, workplaces need to provide enough information. So employers must provide information that may affect the health and safety of a person at a work site. Biggest key things, the hazards, your controls, and the practices and procedures that you're going to follow. Employers should have Occupational Health and Safety Act legislation and code. So, you know, this book here, you can buy it coiled form, you can print it straight off the Alberta Occupational Health and Safety website. The Queen's printer is in control of all this. So, you know, you can do that free of charge or buy the book. You also have to have your health and safety information. So, you know, if you don't have a health and safety program yet, or you're looking at steps, whatever you have is a good start. It's always best to have some form of paper copy that you can be able to provide people. Hazard assessment is a really, really key start, but, you know, have something available. And every owner shall ensure that any hazards identified by the owner are communicated to all. So I hope you guys are really seeing this common trend, those hazards, knowing them, talking about them, eliminating them. That's really key. So post and provide information. So there's lots of information out there that's already readily available. If you haven't checked out the Government of Alberta's website yet, check it out, because you can get all kinds of posters. So that's the first link, is to help prevent the spread posters. The second link is workplace guidance for business owners. And, you know, that's just the start of many different documents that you can get. The Alberta Occupational Health and Safety website has more, but here's just a few things that I've pulled up. Some hand washing procedures. I strongly suggest you get a poster like this, you print it, you laminate it, you stick it in the bathroom. It's not just for employees, it's for the general public to have. And, you know, the open for business posters, you've probably seen those around. So now that we've talked about a lot of the responsibilities, there might be employees out there feeling that, you know, they are put in an unsafe situation. And one of the 3 rights to know of a worker is the right to refuse dangerous work. So Part 4, Section 31 talks about the worker may refuse to work or to do particular work at a work site if the worker believes on reasonable and probable grounds that there is a condition of danger to themselves or somebody else. Now, what the worker needs to do is pretty simple. So they're going to go to the employer or supervisor and report the reason for refusal. Now, if the employer can't fix that problem right away, they must inspect the unsafe condition in the presence of the worker when it is safe. So generally that's going to mean stopping work and figuring out what the problem is. Now, they can't just say, okay, well, you don't want to do this, so I'm just going to get Joe or Sally to do this work instead. If it's indeed unsafe work, nobody can do that work. Now, with larger workplaces, when we have worksite health and safety committees and safety reps, definitely this is a point where we're going to get them involved. And the employer must give a copy of the report once they have remedied the problem to both the worker, our safety committees, reps. So making sure that there is a agreed upon way to make the workplace safe or the task safe.
So Amy, sorry to interrupt again.
No problem.
In this case, we already know that COVID provides the opportunity for anyone to get it, right? And so, I mean, if you're a front-facing employee, it does kind of put you in a position of being in danger. So when we do the hazard assessment, that's to mitigate the risks of getting COVID, right?
Indeed.
And so if we do the hazard assessment and we come to a place where everybody kind of agrees, or everybody agrees, then that means we can go back to work because the hazard assessment has met all of those requirements?
Yeah, that's correct. And you know, one thing that I'm going to touch on as well is there is times where people do report unsafe work and investigations happen, and then the investigator says, your employer has done everything reasonably practical to keep you safe. Yes, you do need to do the work, or perhaps you can be assigned to other work. But yeah, the tool of the hazard assessment, once everybody is agreed to, comfortable, they've followed that hierarchy of control, it should be putting people within a comfort level. That makes sense? Awesome, good. So for assigning work, there is times where maybe work is unsafe just due to the fact that the worker is not competent yet. They haven't performed the task enough. They don't know how to do the task. So in a case like this, work may be given to another worker that is competent. So they have the right training, the right experience, the right qualifications. But in a case like this, what has to happen is the employer needs to let the first worker know the reason for, or the first worker's refusal, so why they refuse. And once that happens, in the opinion of the employer, the worker does not, if in the opinion of the employer, the work does not constitute a danger to health and safety of any other person, or that a dangerous condition is not present, really we can carry on at that point. So this is something that you know, I find is interesting, and we'll see how it plays out with COVID. But there is times that maybe a worker, let's say due to their health, can't do work, so they're refusing. In those situations, they still do need to get paid. The employer can't say, okay, we'll go home, or, you know, I don't need your services anymore. So the worker's going to give, or the employer's going to give the worker other work. So how this kind of plays out, and I'll just go through the slide. So if they've refused work, the worker's entitled to the same wage and benefit that the worker would have received had they continued the work. So the employer is going to reassign the worker to alternative work. So one example that I gave was, maybe you've got a storefront clerk and they have respiratory problems, and they feel that being exposed to a lot of customers is going to endanger their life. So the employer says, okay, well, you're going to go do stocking or inventory now. Now, this is not a form of discrimination, and the worker needs to realize this. They're doing another work that's deemed safe for them at this time, and they're still getting paid.
Hey, Amy, I don't know if this is a question for you or or for an employment lawyer, but I'll ask it anyways. So if I've been hired to do a specific job, and it's in my contract, say I don't know if they do this at grocery stores, but say my contract says that I'm there as a cashier, and I say it's unsafe. If they do, they have to reassign me somewhere else until they do the investigation?
My answer would be, if you're refusing and you have a legitimate reason, yes. You know, certainly I don't want to step on employment standards or employment law, because that is quite distinct from occupational health and safety. But as the law speaks, yeah, they do need to assign you to something.
Okay, I'll clarify that with Luke. I think he's coming on Monday morning to do our 7:30 live, so I'll just clarify that with him. But I just wanted to hear it from your standpoint, so I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, you're very welcome. All right, so one thing too that is certainly a little bit new in the Alberta OH&S Act is workplace violence and harassment. And when we look at this, violence, whether at the work site or work-related, is defined as the threatened, attempted, or actual conduct of a person that causes or is likely to cause physical or psychological injury or harm. So it's not just physical harm that OH&S is protecting against. So this could include physical attacks or aggression, threatening behaviors, verbal or written threats. It could even be domestic violence or sexual violence. Now, certainly in these current times, there's stressful situations. Workplace violence could be for so many different reasons, whether it's, just the stress of being back at work, concerns, financial stress. But I just want everybody to realize that just like any workplace incident or injury, violence and harassment is very much included with Alberta Occupational Health and Safety. Now on the, penalty side of things, we're following the law. If something happens and we choose not to follow the law, there's going to be penalties. This includes anyone and everybody at a workplace. This is not just an employer penalty. So if an officer's in the opinion that a person has contravened a provision of the law, failed to comply with the OH&S law, or makes a false statement or gives false or misleading information to an officer, the officer can give a written notice that's going to have the amount of the administrative penalty. So this penalty can be up to $10,000. So there's a lot of different penalties out there. There are, simple tickets, $1 to $500 an OH&S officer can give. These administrative penalties, and certainly when we get into bigger cases, court cases, negligence, the fines can become a lot higher.
One of the things that people should know, though, about our Alberta officers, certainly the ones in Medicine Hat, I've had to deal with them on construction sites, and they are they want to work with you. So so if somebody in your office reports you to them, they're going to come and they're going to work with you. They're not just going to come and automatically write you a fine unless you're like blatantly in the obstruction of the law.
Yeah, very good point, Sandra. And just when you look at the mandate, occupational health and safety, primarily they're looking at awareness, education, and then we tend to get to the enforcement side of things. So that's a really good point, and it's not something that any officers aren't out there looking for problems, but they're out to help offer solutions. All right, so this was the document that I had the link for, so the respiratory viruses and the workplace. So this is a really good document. You can throw this straight into your health and safety program. The first page gives us just some key information, so following best practices in your workplace, including hand washing, social distancing, staying home from work, getting medical attention if you don't feel well, and monitor public health alerts and follow advisories. So the second page, which I've read many, many times, as you can see very highlighted, is the legal requirements and infection prevention. This is where we get our general duties for employers, supervisors, workers, and hazard assessment and control. So this is giving us a good guideline, which is page 2 of the slide. Again, the link is in the PowerPoint, but we'll go through these steps too of the hierarchy. So a hazard assessment is a written process to recognize existing and potential hazards at work before they cause harm. So key is this needs to be done ahead of time. If you've already relaunched, you haven't done your hazard assessment, still do it, but best is to do it ahead of time. The reason we're doing it is to eliminate or control hazards before they happen. We all have different risk tolerances. So everybody's different. If I took somebody who was very adverse to risk and I asked them what they wanted to do compared to someone who, they maybe are a bit of a daredevil, the answers are gonna be very different. So by making a written process, we are setting a guideline everybody is gonna follow. And that's why hazard assessments are best created with a team. So, weeks ago, that's what we did. We had a Zoom meeting and our team built the hazard assessment. And that way we know all the tasks. So, we, for example, have our front end staff. We've got our bookkeeper, we've got our instructors, we've got our business development. Everyone's doing something a little bit different. Some people are going to be really more exposed to our customers or clients, where others not as much. So, you know, there's a lot of nuts and bolts to be working with. So the who, when it comes to our hazard assessment and control, so employers must involve affected workers in the hazard assessment and control or elimination of hazards identified. So it is, again, a legal duty. And every single workplace out there has hazards, especially now with our relaunching. So our very first step was elimination, and what many of our workplaces were required to do was to actually close our doors. So we could eliminate a lot of our hazard by doing that. So I'm going to just skip to our hierarchy. So we've got that elimination step. So we can eliminate really by just taking the worker away from that danger, or taking the danger away from the worker. For substitution, well, maybe we're not at work, but we're working from home, right? So we can substitute how we're doing things. We're doing things a lot more based on technology, web-based webinars, meetings, and the list can go on. So then, and I'm going to bring up the slides. The next control is our engineering controls, which focus on the design of things. Administrative controls focus on how we do the work. And our last line of defense, it is a little teeny triangle, very much on purpose. That is our personal protective equipment. So for engineer controls, you've probably seen a lot of workplaces and businesses have plexiglass. So we're getting a barrier between workers and whether it be public or other workplaces. Technology, we could look at that also as an engineer control. We have administrative control, which now we're looking at how we're doing the work, which is vastly changing. So building those hazard assessments, building particular procedures, so step-by-steps, practices, do's, don'ts, even looking at code of practices for things that are a little more complicated or a little more risky. Hand hygiene, social distancing, what do you have for regular cleaning policies? How do people know that you've cleaned? How do your team and your customers feel safe? So maybe posting boards of cleaning regimens and making sure workers are trained. So PPE, that last line of defense, so that stands for personal protective equipment. This is a control for the worker. And often it is our last barrier. And I'm not saying PPE is not important, it certainly is. But we need all these other controls in place for PPE to work well. So some of the biggest types of personal protective equipment, of course, are going to be our gloves, our face masks, and even in some cases, more advanced, like a positive pressure respiratory protective equipment. Now, if an employer is going to be issuing PPE for their workers, they need to make sure the workers know how to use the equipment properly. So they're trained. Part 18 of the code goes through all of that. You know, just even something, for example, simple as a mask. Sure, a mask is great for some purposes, but are you using the right mask? Are you using the mask in the right way? Sometimes gloves and masks are simply helping to prevent us from being able to touch our mouths. Sometimes they're protecting other people more than ourselves, and we need to understand all those ins and outs, and to make sure if we're touching our mask, we're contaminating it. A lot of masks are one-time use. They need to be disposed. So any of this disposable masks, it's great. We've got a lot of cloth masks coming out. We can wash those, but follow the right procedure. And you employers out there, you need to make sure and educate yourself so you can educate your teams. So this is a code of practice, again, from Occupational Health and Safety on respiratory protective equipment. All right, so we're going to get now into our meat and potatoes. We're going to talk about all these controls mixed in building a hazard assessment. So we're going to focus on tasks, hazards, and how to control our hazards. We know our hazard assessments, to be effective, have to be in writing so we can review them, we can communicate them. They need to be dated. I already mentioned best to create this with your team. If you create the hazard assessment as the employer, you need to communicate it with your team. And build priorities. You know, we may not be able to do absolutely every control in one day, but work in steps. That's where looking at a risk matrix, when you're looking at what is the likelihood of this being a hazard, of something going wrong, versus what is the severity of the hazard. So I've kept this hazard assessment really simple. You can add an extra column if you want to prioritize your hazard level. So is it high, a moderate, or low risk? But you know, for a lot of us, use the KISS method, just get something in writing. So I'm going to just bring up one task to start. So I'll see how many I can get through. But a task that's going to be common to almost every workplace out there that sees public. So for us, we've got our students coming in and out of the campus. What are our hazards? Well, somebody could either, you know, have COVID-19, perhaps be a carrier. So we've got all those thoughts in our mind. So what are some controls we can put into place? Well, number one, we make sure and educate both our team and our customers. If you're not feeling well, please don't come for your training. Save it for another time. Now, when students do come into the campus, right away we have posters. We've got our table tents of reminders for social distancing, preventing spread, not touching your face, good hand washing, and we've got hand sanitizer. So another thing that we do for education, even prior to students coming to the campus, is we educate them on the fact that when you come in, we don't want you in and out, because now we're just providing more risk that maybe you've gone for lunch somewhere. What have you touched? What are you bringing back to the campus? So students will be required to bring their own lunch, water, snacks, coffee. That way we are not, they're not touching a common coffee dispenser or water dispenser. We do have individual water bottles and snacks for people that, you know, we've got a procedure that we can safely get them to our customers. But all this took a lot of thought and education. For hand hygiene with students, when they come in, not only is there hand sanitizer, we're going to remind them every break, do some hand washing. For our team, we remind them about hand washing. So having those visuals, the communication reminders, and something else we can do, since we've got public coming in, they're going to come straight to the classroom. So we're going to social distance, like get students going straight to the classroom. And then from there, we've got the next task of running classes. So one of the first hazards we have in the classroom is going to be student spacing. So what we've done to eliminate or mitigate that risk is we've got only one person allowed per table. And we're going to alternate side by side. So you might have noticed that in the picture, instead of people being right in front of each other, we're staggering them. Instructors are going to remind students throughout the day to remember their social distancing. So when they're not sitting at tables, perhaps they're doing practicals, we're going to make sure that they're 2 meters apart. We do have gloves and masks available if the students want to use them. We've limited our class size to be able to keep our social distancing where we want it to be. And instructors will guide students from a distance. So they're going to make sure they're always at least 2 meters away. Now, another hazard of running a class is we've got props. So what we've done now is instead of people touching common props, first aid, for example, everybody gets their own mannequin, which we've got germ guard sanitization spray that you spray on soft or hard surfaces, leave it for 10 minutes and it's going to disinfect. So everyone's got their own mannequin. When they're done, we're spraying down tables, chairs, props, everything. And we let our students know throughout the day, these are the procedures that we're going to be taking. We used to have a lot more paper. We've downsized the amount of paper that we're using and making sure that mostly one person's going to be responsible for paper, and the paper is going to sit there for a couple days before our front-end staff are going to process it. Some of the other big things that we're looking at communicating is allowing students to do some of their own sanitization as well. One other thing that a lot of people are going to be dealing with at the workplace are things like payments and in our case, registrations. So where students used to come, line up, they'd register for class, they'd go to class, they'd fill out more paperwork. Now it's happening.
We'll just wait a second to see if Amy unfreezes. She might have to pop back in.
Frozen?
You froze there for a minute, so.
Oh, am I back?
You're back.
Okay, good. So I was probably talking about payments and registration.
You were just about to talk about payments and registration.
Okay, perfect, good. So what we're looking at with payments is anybody who's not invoiced will have to prepay. So they're going to pay via e-transfer or pay by Visa. So now our front-end staff aren't taking payments. Registration process, we're not lining people up anymore. They're going to go straight to the classroom, fill in a registration, and then we can still track who's there through that registration process. And, you know, just some of the big things is simply looking at how do we sanitize? How do we keep people comfortable, safe? What can others do to help promote the safety of the campus? So, you know, that hazard assessment does not need to be complicated. Get an Excel spreadsheet, I'll include one, just title it column 1 task, column 2 hazards, column 3, how do you eliminate and control hazards? And if you want to build that 4th column, which would be your level of risk, you can have low, moderate, high risk. So, you know, lots of tools. The hazard assessment does not have to be difficult. Just work with your team to build it. So that wraps up my PowerPoint and the presentation. So we'll have a few minutes here if anyone has any immediate questions.
So I just put into the chat, I just asked if anyone had a specific task they'd like you to run through.
Sure.
Yeah, so I mean, if they're a retail business, maybe it's the cashier, but you kind of ran through that with your payment options there. Thinking, what about a server who has to bring somebody's food out to them?
Okay, sure. So for a server, the task would be delivering the food. So we look at the hazard of that, and certainly we're going to have a hazard of, so now we've got a plate that the server could contact. We've got a hazard of the server's bringing the plate to a table, so they're going to be in contact potentially with people. So if we look at that being the immediate task, just bringing the food over, those are some simple hazards. So if we look at ways to control the hazards, what the server is going to be doing is looking at some PPE. So likely I'm going to guess a lot of workplaces are probably going to have gloves for servers. They're going to approach the table where somebody isn't sitting so they can keep as best social distancing as possible.
Mhm.
Making sure when they're talking to their customers, they're keeping a distance. We've certainly been listening a lot to a lot of the reports, and just even, that moist speaking. Let's eliminate that. Let's feed back a little bit, right?
It's been waiting to use that one.
Yeah, so it's just talking it through and just looking what else might happen, right? What else could just be a hazard, perhaps even walking over there. Now that there's going to be more like that half capacity, maybe tables are spread out more, and one of our hazards is going to just be, do we have enough of a pathway to get the servers to where they need to go? So there's lots to think about, and when you start one task, then it just makes you think of the others. So we're bringing the food to the table. What about now collecting the food? I don't know exactly what restaurants are going to be doing, but are they going to be using full PPE for people who are collecting food? Maybe they're going to have different people collecting the plates than brought it out. It's going to be really neat to see how people are mitigating their risks.
Yeah, there's one question in there, like, are you aware of anything specific for children's classes for summer programs? And it's such a difficult question, because I mean, there's so much difference between physically distancing for children and as there is for adults. Like, children really don't get it, right? And so
Yeah.
so those hazard assessments will be fairly in depth, and you'll likely have to work with your staff to. And another question was, do you think servers will have to wear masks? And I think it will depend on the work site and the level of comfort of each of the people within that work site. So if you and your employer are working on your hazard assessment, and all 5 of you say, well, we're comfortable not wearing masks, then that's a level of risk that your employer will have to decide, well, how do you think the people will feel that are coming in?
Indeed.
Right? Because it may not be just about you, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think one thing a person can think of, when it would be maybe more of an engineer control per se, is a barrier. Could we have a containment that goes over the food, that when the food gets to the table, the customer takes that off?
Great idea.
And that would eliminate some of the need for masks, because
Sure
there's a
would.
barrier.
Yeah, that's a really good one.
Yeah. I think too, like,
any ideas for people who will be working with children at summer camps? Any
yeah, I'm going to say they need to be very creative and think of activities right away that are going to provide distancing, and make those the activities, and make the kids feel really important. Hey, you've got your very own table, and you've got lots of space around you. Like, and it might be kind of funny, but maybe for the first while, I've heard of some people that actually attach a pool noodle to themselves.
Yeah.
So have the kids attach a pool noodle to themselves, so they're giving themselves distancing to understand, hey, this is what 2 meters means.
Right.
And just make it fun.
Yeah, and that's a really great idea. Yeah, and they're talking about making sure that you're not doing activities where there's an easy risk of transmission. So like water tables and water type activities should not be undertaken, things like that, right? So
For sure.
and we have to remember that, again, that what we're talking about is the moisture that comes out of your mouth. So when you're breathing, and in the winter, when you can see that your breath in the air, that's what they're talking about, is those droplets. And so they don't come very far, they do fall down, but then it's the surfaces that they sit on that are actually the problem. So that's just an interesting clarification. Of one more question in here. I just wanted to clarify, I know we touched on this earlier, but if you have a business that you are requiring people to come in to be wearing masks, we as businesses should be providing that PPE. So she's wondering if, because she wants people to wear masks when they come in, do they have to provide it?
Okay, so customers.
Yes.
You can build the policy however you want. If your policy is going to be for customers, in order to enter our business, you need a mask, you don't have to provide it. If you want your employees to wear a mask, that's a different story. So if you want to post a big sign on your front door saying that in order to enter, you would require a mask, then the public, general public, would have to provide their own. If, as an employer, you want to provide it, make it clear to your customers, we will provide a mask. We require you to wear it when you're in our business.
Very good. Yeah, and I think that's a really good point. A lot of people have gone out and purchased their own masks, right?
Yeah.
And they are wearing them. So yeah, so I think that's really, really great. You don't have to provide it, but if you state that they have to wear it, that's when we get into that whole morality issue. You cannot allow them to come in if they don't have one. So, so those are the decisions that you'll make when you're doing your hazard assessments.
For sure.
Yeah. So I don't see any, if we are asking the public to wear masks, can we charge them a fee to buy one from us? I suppose you could. I mean, if you have them at the front and they're sanitized properly and in a bag and all of those things that you need to do, if somebody says, "Oh shoot, I forgot my mask," you can say, "Yeah, we have one here for purchase for $5 or something." I mean, I don't see why you couldn't do that. Mm-hmm. It is just another revenue stream, right?
For sure. And I think just being very careful in how you are advertising and promoting what you're doing.
Right. Yeah, I think that'll make a difference as well.
Yeah.
So good. Yeah. Somebody said, "Oh, no shirt, no shoes, no service." So now we're going to no shirt, no shoes, no mask, no service. I like it. I like it. We could probably play on that. We could make a great big poster for it. Well, that was really, really great, Amy. So you're going to make the slides available. Yeah. I see that you've got your email address up here, so people can contact you that way. I just realized I think I can embed all of the links into the email that everyone will get tomorrow as a follow-up. So I will go ahead and do that. If you could just send me all of the links, that would be great, just as links. Then I can throw that in. And I have to tell you, I don't know if you know this, but safety is near and dear to my heart. So I ran a safety company for years. I'm a CRSP. And I'm a big fan of occupational health and safety and making your workplace safer for the people that are there and for your customers. And so so I was very, very happy to have you come on and present today. I think you were great.
Oh, awesome. Well, thank you so much, Sandra, and thank you for having me. What a great opportunity.
Wonderful. Okay. That's it. I will go ahead and end this. I will be posting this up onto the YouTube site. I'll be sending Amy a copy so she can use it as well. Slides will go out and the links. So that's everything.
Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you so much.
Yes, stay safe.